Hello everyone, back tuning into today's second video. We're going to have a look at the Meteo France and ECMWF long-range models at the Copernicus website. For today's second video, see what they're showing for the next few months. So we're going to be starting with the tri-monthly period of January, February, March, which is kind of like the rest of the winter and the start of spring. And then we go on into the rest of the spring, February, March, April, and March, April, May. So you get your first heads up about what these long-range models are showing, not only for late winter but also for spring. Going to add the GWD, the German model, to this as well. They've added more models at Copernicus over the past month or so. So it won't just be Meteo France and ECM. It will also be the German DWD. I could add more, but I think that will be enough to be getting on with for this video. I won't be able to show you the month-by-month breakdowns of the ECMWF seasonal model now, unfortunately. At the website weather.us. They've gone pay-per-view at weather.us, so I would have to pay to access the charts, and I wouldn't be able to show you them because they would be copyright protected, being sort of exclusive pay-to-view content. So unfortunately, from now on, unless something changes, maybe they'll start showing month-by-month charts at Copernicus at some point, but for the time being, I won't be able to do the month-by-month breakdown for you of the ECMWF model, unfortunately. Just say that the first video released earlier on today was the week's 10-day video update, got all the latest on the stratospheric warming with that one. We may have an ensembles watch for you tonight. I'm not sure if we will or not. Just depends if we can fit it in. But we may have an ensembles watch this evening looking ahead with the GFS ensembles towards the New Year period. That might be with you this evening. I'll keep you updated on the GWV social media accounts about that. So let's get on with it. We're going to start off with the mean sea level pressure anomalies for Meteo France, and then we'll have a look at the ECMWF. We'll finish off with the DWD. So we're going to begin with the mean sea level pressure anomaly for January, February, March. This is covering the rest of the winter and into just the beginning of the spring with the Meteo France seasonal model. And we see that we've got an area of high pressure being forecast by Meteo France to be around Greenland and also going down into the North Atlantic as well. Then there's a corresponding trough of low pressure that's sitting over the UK and western parts of Europe. So you'd expect this to be a pretty cold signature, although we don't have a massive amount of high pressure over Scandinavia. So it's not a huge blocking feature from Scandinavia to Greenland, but nevertheless, that's probably enough high pressure over Greenland to be forcing cold air into this trough of low pressure that's sitting around the UK and much of Western Europe. So Meteo France for late winter looks like it still has enough blocking there to be producing potentially quite a cold sort of mid to late winter period. Then we go through to February, March, April. The next tri-monthly period with Meteo France looks like that. And it has an area of low pressure then centred over the top of the UK, more or less, with high pressure over towards Newfoundland. It does extend up to Greenland to some degree, but it looks like that high pressure is beginning to drift a little bit further southwards. And so this is probably starting to let the jet stream through a little bit. You'll probably be starting to bring the jet stream through the ridge rather like that. So we get through towards sort of the end of the winter and into the spring, and I think the idea is probably that we start to revert to more of a westerly type pattern, which would bring milder air in from off the Atlantic for the very end of the winter, but more likely actually I would have thought into the start of the spring as well. And then finally, for Meteo France, we go through to March, April, May. So this is how the spring of 2019 is looking with Meteo France. It looks rather unsettled spring, actually. We've got low pressure up to the north of the UK. We've got high pressure through the middle part of the Atlantic. and we're bringing westerlies through like that. So it's rather a westerly scene, definitely. You'd expect to be bringing a lot of westerly winds in across not just the UK but much of northern Europe through the spring. Would be most unsettled in the north. It would be driest in the south, but I suspect with that westerly influence we would all have some unsettled conditions at times. Not an overly warm spring either. I would imagine near average temperatures, really near normal temperatures, with those westerly winds coming in from off the northern part of the Atlantic. Let's see how temperatures are doing with Meteo France. So this is how the temperature anomaly looks for January, February, March, and we can see that we are close to cooler than average conditions, actually, colder average conditions to the northwest of the UK. Not really much in the way of colder than average temperature anomalies, but it has to be said. Southern and southeastern parts of Europe. Here we see a rather above average temperature anomalies down across southern, southeastern parts of Europe. But for the rest of us, basically, we've got average temperatures across northern Europe. Bearing in mind, these long-range models do tend to overcook the temperatures a little bit. So I suspect a lot of the areas where we're seeing average temperature anomalies here, UK, Ireland, sort of much of Germany, up to Scandinavia, those sort of areas over towards the Baltic, I suspect those sort of areas will probably be coming out rather colder than average, with that level of blocking that we have there over Greenland, with southern and southeastern parts of Europe getting the milder than average temperatures through late winter. Notice to our north we have got above average temperatures sitting way to the north. That is giving away the blocking signature that's up to the north of the country. Then we go through to February, March, April, and the temperature anomaly looks very similar, actually. So much of southern Europe forecast to be rather mild, a mild end to winter and into the early to middle part of the spring, whereas northern Europe looks cooler, not cold, not colder than average for northern Europe, but close to average or no signal. And I suspect again you will probably expect things to be, particularly for northeastern parts of Europe, a little bit colder. Out in the west, I think at this point we are beginning to re-establish a little bit more of a westerly flow. So for the UK and Ireland, probably it makes sense and it will be close to average. But I think further north and northeast, you could still expect quite a cold period there from February, March and April. And then we go through to March, April, May, the spring of 2019. Still looks a little bit milder than average across southern Europe through the Mediterranean, but not exceptionally so, but still a little bit milder than average across southern Europe. Otherwise, again, close to average temperatures. Remember what's happening here is that we've got low pressure up to the north and we've got high pressure down to the southwest, and so we're just bringing in a flat westerly flow really for the anomaly, mean pressure anomaly for the spring. And so westerly winds would be dominating, and of course by the time you get through to May, westerly winds are not going to be overly mild. So average temperatures, or perhaps even a little bit on the cool side, heading into spring. Precipitation wise, we're looking like this. So this precipitation anomaly from Meteo France for January, February, March. And again, it shows back to our north across Scandinavia and also around Iceland. And we can't really see Greenland, but it's over there. And it does look as though it's drier than average across the northern latitudes, indicating a high pressure signal that is likely to be sitting in this area through the late winter period. Then we've got above average precipitation being forecast for the central parts of Europe, so Spain, Portugal, towards France, and to the south of the UK. Above average precipitation telling us that the jet stream is likely to be on a more southerly track with low pressure through here. And again, that's the reason with the high pressure up here, but we could well be forcing some cold air down into that area of low pressure. So a wet signal for central and southern parts of Europe and a colder, drier signal really for northern parts of Europe for January, February, March. February, March, April looking like that. So again, it looks rather unsettled through the central parts of Europe, so kind of like from France over there to sort of Poland, which will be over here, probably encompassing Germany and the Low Countries as well. Looks a little bit above average with precipitation for those areas. Still driving average over towards Greenland. excuse me, up there. A little bit more unsettled for Scandinavia, just perhaps implying that we're likely to be re-establishing a bit more of an Atlantic flow through February, March and April as well. Then March, April, May looks like that. It looks rather unsettled for Northern Europe through this period. So Scandinavia down towards Central Europe, over towards the Low Countries, Ireland, UK. All those areas are likely to be seeing westerly winds. And low pressure, of course, is up here. So we'd be bringing in bands of rain off the Atlantic. Rather an unsettled westerly sort of spring. Temperatures a little bit on the cool side. Or certainly no better than average. Spain and Portugal looking drier than average. That could be the place to go for some early summer warmth and dry weather, perhaps down to Spain and Portugal. That's Meteo France. This is the ECMWF. So again, this is mean sea level pressure anomalies from the ECM for January, February, March. And we see that we've got this blocking signal more centred towards Scandinavia this time, but it does ridge out towards Iceland and also to Greenland as well. It actually ties back to the Siberian high over there. So that's a very large blocking feature that the ECM is forecasting to be across the northern latitude. More extensive blocking compared to what Meteo France was showing. So this has a greater tendency, I would have thought, to be bringing in cold easterly winds. We've got low pressure through the middle of the Atlantic, but also running into sort of central southern parts of Europe. The jet stream is likely to be running through there somewhere to the south of the UK, and we're likely to be pulling in cold easterly winds in that sort of direction. So that looks pretty extreme with the blocking, actually, from the ECMWF. A strong blocking signal would favour cold winds from the east for the UK and for much of Northern Europe as well during the mid to late winter period. This actually goes on into February, March, April. The blocking not quite as strong, but even so, still a pretty strong signal for high pressure to be centred towards Scandinavia. We're losing the low pressure to our south to some degree, so that's probably just because the jet stream is weakening. As again, towards the end of the winter and into the spring, the jet stream will automatically start to weaken. But this is probably still bringing in pretty cold easterly winds across much of Northern Europe, and you would expect those easterly winds to still be impacting the UK as well. And then we go through to March, April and May. And this looks a little bit better then. As we get through to the spring itself, we weaken that area of high pressure and move it south, collapse it south a little bit. So just an anticyclonic signal really for the spring mean sea level pressure anomaly, high pressure close to the UK. Possibly even bringing up some milder winds from the south or from the southwest. So eventually, it takes a long time to get going. A delayed spring, definitely. Eventually, we do finish up with quite pleasant conditions as we get through to March, April, May. That's probably mainly down to what's happening in May. Temperature anomalies are looking like this, so not as mild, you'll notice, across Europe with the temperature anomaly as Meteo France with the ECM. We do still have the idea that southern Europe is coming out milder than average, but not by as much as we have with Meteo France. We also have some substantially milder than average conditions to our north. Again, that's down to the blocking signature that's sitting over the North Pole. In between, there's no real colder than average area, and you very rarely get that with these long-range models. So all of this area just here that's indicated white, it's average or it's no signal, but I suspect because of the mean sea level pressure anomaly having a very extensive blocking signal, you would tend to expect quite a lot of cold weather with easterly winds in those areas. So I think you have to shave off a degree or two there for much of Northern Europe, and you would expect it to be pretty cold through January, February, March with that level of blocking in terms of the mean sea level pressure anomaly. February, March, April, very similar. So again, southern Europe, Spain, Portugal, through the Mediterranean, over towards Italy, also into the southeast of Europe around Greece. Those sort of areas still coming out a little bit milder than average. We also have milder than average temperature anomalies across the northern latitudes, indicative of the blocking signature still going on. Otherwise, it's average or no signal. I suspect many of these areas, the UK and Ireland included, because of that still ongoing favourability towards easterly winds, and Scandinavian highs will probably still be pretty cold, though, with those easterly winds through this end of winter and early spring period. Then we go through to March, April, May, and it looks a lot better then. We go milder than average for much of Western Europe. Also, Scandinavia is going milder than average. So obviously a change is taking place there. The high pressure that has been over Scandinavia through most of the late winter and early spring is repositioning. High pressure has been over there and over here through much of the period, but now that high pressure is kind of like sinking into that sort of position. And so this starts to drag up much milder winds from the south and also from the southwest. So takes a while. It's a delayed spring that's being indicated here, but the spring does eventually get going. Precipitation anomalies, again we see very strong signals for all of those drier, all of those block conditions to the north, where it's drier than average here close to Scandinavia, drier than average close to Iceland. Can't see Greenland, but it's over there, looks drier than average too, and to the north of Scotland. So all of that area is likely to be encompassed by high pressure. And then, of course, we've got pretty wet conditions across southern and southeastern parts of Europe, above average precipitation there. Otherwise, not much else to be seen. But I suspect because it would be a pretty cold signal with these easterly winds for much of central and northern Europe, and I suspect that there will be a fair amount of dry weather, because cold air holds less moisture than the mild air, warm air. But any precipitation that does fall is likely to be falling as snow quite frequently, I would have thought. And then we go through to February, March, April, and again it's a very similar scene. We still have this blocking signature to the north, so still hinting at quite a lot of high pressure being to our north. Little bit wetter than average still in the southeast of Europe, excuse me, but not quite as much as we have through the January, February, March period. Otherwise, again, basically average precipitation probably will still be favouring relatively dry conditions. And then finally we go through to March, April and May. And by this point the signature is getting very, very weak indeed, so there's not much to be seen with precipitation from the ECMWF for the spring itself. Other than perhaps hinting at being a bit drier in that sort of area, but it is a very, very weak signal that we have for March, April, May. And then finally, we've got the DWD, the German model. So this has just started to be included at the Copernicus website. They're continuing to increase the amount of models that they include within their suite of long-range output. So I thought I'd just throw this one in because when we did the final seasonal model roundup, winter of 2018-19, the DWD was actually the only model really that was going for a relatively mild winter, going for low pressure to be dominant, but it has shifted big time during December. So now it's in line with the other models. It's still going for this strong blocking signature, or it is going now for this strong blocking signature around Greenland. We've got the low pressure to the south of it. Low pressure is running through the central part of the Atlantic, so lots of low pressure down there, and the jet stream is going into central southern parts of Europe as well. And you would expect this to be cold, you expect to be bringing in an easterly flow there. Quite extensive northern blocking being signalled now for late winter, January, February, March from the DWD. And this goes on into February, March, April as well, still keeping high pressure blocking things out over Greenland. A very extensive area of high pressure is still there. It still extends to Scandinavia to some degree. The low pressure to our south is weakening. That's as we lose the strength within the jet stream. We haven't got the contrast at this point between the tropics and the pole that we do through the earlier winter, and so we lose the strength of the jet stream. But nevertheless, it still looks as though low pressure and a southerly tracking jet stream is impacting southern parts of Europe through February, March, April. And then we get through to March, April, May, and we see signs of a change then. The high pressure is moving down more towards the central part of the Atlantic. Low pressure is up here. And so this is more in line really with what Meteo France is showing, with a reversion through the spring into more of a westerly sort of Atlantic flow. Temperature anomalies with the DWD look like that. So again, it is in line with Meteo France in that most of Europe is coming out milder than average, despite that strong blocking signal that we have there. Across Greenland, we see that temperature anomalies are above average for much of Central and Southern Europe in particular. Scandinavia is closer to average, as is the UK and Ireland. Those areas look cooler. And I still think you could shave off quite a lot from the temperature from that, to be honest, based on that extensive blocking signal that we have to the north, particularly close to Greenland. That's February, March, April. Looks a lot cooler as we go through February, March, April. So it might pick up on a very cold February, something like that, and then nearer normal temperatures for March and April. Never rule that kind of situation out. But for the 3 months, it does look a lot cooler. We lose all of that yellow and orange. It's restricted really to the Mediterranean. And most central northern parts of Europe, UK, Ireland included, coming out with no signal. I suspect that will be a pretty cold 3-monthly anomaly. And then we go through to March, April, May. The spring itself looks as though it does eventually get milder. We see the temperatures beginning to lift up here across northern parts of Europe in particular. Finally, for precipitation, so this is how precipitation anomalies are looking for January, February, March from the DWD. And again, we see this evidence of a blocking signal to the north. It's drier than average close to Iceland. It's drier than average over towards Norway. That's normally a telltale sign that you've got high pressure to the north of Europe, blocking things out close to Iceland and Greenland. Looks very wet down across the southwestern parts of Europe. So again, this is indicative of a southerly tracking jet stream. It's a little bit wrong. So it's indicative of a southerly tracking jet stream going through something like that. So it brings a lot of wet weather potentially into Spain and Portugal. Also potentially wet weather into France. So that wet weather does get up to the UK. But of course, we've got the high pressure that's sitting up here. So this is a little bit mouth-watering actually if you like snow, because you're going to get the southwesterly wind coming up from the Atlantic, but you're also going to find these cold easterly winds being fed in across northern Europe, and so you're going to get a battle, and that's the kind of situation that can dump quite a bit of snow to the UK and to Ireland, and that could be more focused across the south actually, and quite unusual. It may be that late winter is going to be quite snowy in the south, reasonably dry up in the north of the UK, which would be rather an unusual situation. That doesn't happen all that often. Then we go through to February, March, April. Again, we lose the intensity of the jet stream. We lose those southerly tracking areas of low pressure to some degree. So it remains a little bit wetter than average close to the Bay of Biscay out in the Atlantic. We still look drier than average to the north of Scotland. So this is still a pretty strong blocking signal that we have there to the north of the country. Otherwise, there's just lots of sort of white, lots of no signal or average going on with precipitation through February, March, April, and then we get through to the spring, full spring itself, March, April, May, and we look like that. Again, very, very weak signals for the spring. We know we've got high pressure from a mean level pressure anomaly, more centered in the middle of the Atlantic with low pressure up here. So again, it does look like a reversion back to a more general westerly flow as we're going into the spring, with probably a recovery in temperature, but it may be a little bit unsettled, especially for northern parts of Europe. So quite an interesting update. I think the focus is on the late winter period, January, February, March. Sorry about that. So the emphasis is on January, February, March, the late winter to early spring period. All three models are going for a consistent signal for strong northern blocking to be around Greenland, with hints certainly from all of those model suites of a southerly tracking jet stream. Therefore, you would expect a pretty cold and wintry sort of mid to late winter across many central and northern parts of Europe. I know we've barely had any winter winter so far during December, but it does look as though things could be getting a lot more interesting there through the middle and latter part of the winter. Possibly hints of a bit of a delayed spring as well. It could take quite a while to lose that blocking signal once it gets going, so even on into the early spring it could remain pretty chilly. Eventually though, all models are in agreement that we are going to see a reversion through the spring back to milder westerly winds, so it'll take a little while, maybe a bit delayed, but the spring should get going later on, and once it does we're probably going to just a general sort of average type westerly pattern, which will bring more rain at times to the north, but also some drier, pleasant conditions into the south as well. But I think the main thing to focus on is the potential for quite a cold end to the winter, maybe even middle part of winter through January, February. We could see some pretty cold conditions at times. I think for much of Northern Europe, and the UK and Ireland could be included in that as well. Right, do it over again next month, so that'll take us through spring and into the beginning of the summer, of course, with January's ECMWF Meteo France. I suppose we should say DWD update, so that'll be with you next month. So coming up later on today, we may have the an ensembles watch up, maybe with you this evening. Not sure if we'll do that or not, but just keep an eye on the guys over his social media accounts. And also, of course, there's a video we released earlier on, looking at next week to 10 days. All of the latest on the sun stratospheric warming is included in that. Tomorrow, Christmas Eve, so we've got the weekend forecast for you on Christmas Eve, our usual weekend forecast for Christmas Eve, and then on Christmas Day we've got the historic video looking at winter of 1968-1969. That'll be the this year's Christmas Day historic weather video. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.